They found the Bible on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was the day my personal maid, Noor, changed the silk sheets on my bed. Cream-colored Italian silk, imported twice a year, softer than anything you've ever touched in your life. She was pulling back the mattress cover, and it slipped out. Just fell. Onto marble floors that cost more per square meter than most families earn in a year. She looked at it. She looked at me. And in 12 years of service, I had never seen fear on Noor's face. Not once. But in that moment, her brown eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she whispered. She actually whispered, like the walls themselves were listening. "Your Highness, if they find this..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, because we both knew what happened to people in this palace who betrayed the crown. But let me take you back. Back before the Bible. Back before the fear. Back to the life that looked, from the outside, like paradise. I was born into a world most people only see in movies, and even then, the movies get it wrong. Our palace in Riyadh had 214 rooms. 214. I didn't know all of them. There were entire wings I was forbidden from entering. Entire floors that existed only as locked doors at the end of long, echoing corridors. The ceilings were 30 feet high, draped in Venetian crystal chandeliers that caught the light and scattered it like diamonds across floors of white Carrara marble. When you walked those hallways at night, your footsteps didn't just echo. They multiplied, bouncing off surfaces so cold and so hard that you felt, even in your own home, like an intruder. The air always smelled of oud, that deep, ancient, smoky perfume, the kind that costs thousands of dirhams per ounce and is burned in every corner of every room as a symbol of wealth and tradition. Oud mixed with rosewater, mixed with the scent of Michelin-starred food being prepared by a private French chef who flew in twice a week. Everything was expensive. Everything was perfect. Everything was suffocating. I owned 47 abayas, the long flowing robes worn by women in the Gulf, and not one of them cost less than $8,000. Balmain, Givenchy, custom embroidered with gold thread by a designer in Paris who knew my measurements by heart. I had a closet the size of a Manhattan apartment dedicated entirely to Hermès. Bags, scarves, perfumes, a Birkin collection that my cousins envied. I rode in armored Mercedes convoys. I flew on private jets with gold leaf bathroom fixtures. I ate from actual gold plates. And I want to tell you something right now. Looking straight into this camera, I was the most miserable human being I have ever known. If you've never had wealth, real, obscene, kingdom-level wealth, you might think, that's ridiculous. How could she be miserable? And I understand that, truly. But hear me. Money is the most beautiful prison ever built, and I was locked so deep inside mine that I had forgotten there were walls. 5 times a day, the adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, would echo through our private mosque inside the palace grounds. A real mosque, with real minarets, real calligraphy on the walls in gold leaf, real imported Persian carpets worth more than I can say. 5 times a day I would kneel, face toward Mecca, and recite words I had memorized before I could read. Words I said perfectly, words I felt nothing from. I was 23 years old. I had everything the world said would make a woman happy. And at night, when the servants left and the palace settled into its heavy marble silence, I would lie on my silk sheets and stare at the 30-foot ceiling and feel something that I did not have a word for yet, a hollow, a wound, a hunger that no gold plate could ever feed. I didn't know then that what I was starving for had a name. I didn't know that the answer to that hunger was already making its way toward me, hidden inside a book, slipped beneath the mattress of my $200,000 bed, waiting for the night I would finally open it. The night I found that book. Everything changed. And the night they found it, everything burned. His name was Prince Khalid. Not my father, my uncle. And I need you to understand something before I describe him to you. Prince Khalid was not a loud man. He was not the kind of villain who screams and throws things, and makes his cruelty obvious. No, men like Prince Khalid, men who have held absolute power since birth, men who have never once in their lives been told no. They don't need volume. They operate in whispers, in pauses. In the slow, deliberate way, he would rotate the heavy gold Rolex on his left wrist when he was displeased, clockwise, always clockwise, round and round that thick gold band catching the chandelier light, while his eyes stayed perfectly, terrifyingly still. I had watched that watch my entire life. I knew what it meant. When the watch was still, he was relaxed, generous even. The uncle who brought me Swiss chocolates from Geneva and called me Habibti, my beloved, in front of the family. When the watch started turning, someone was about to lose something, their title, their freedom. Once, and I will never forget this as long as I live, their life. I was 9 years old the first time I understood what my uncle really was. A cousin of mine, a boy named Faris, had been caught speaking to a foreign journalist. Nothing significant. A few careless words about palace life, overheard and reported. Faris was 17. He had laughing eyes and he used to sneak me extra baklava from the kitchen. 3 days after the report reached my uncle's desk, Faris was gone. No announcement, no funeral. Just gone. His room cleared out. His name removed from family gatherings. His mother, my aunt, was never permitted to speak his name again. I asked my mother, Umi, where Faris had gone. She grabbed both my hands so tightly it hurt, leaned down to my face, and said 4 words I never forgot. He was never born. That was Prince Khalid's power. He didn't just punish people, he erased them. I was 23 when he called me into the majlis. The majlis, for those who don't know, is the formal reception hall, the place where royal business is conducted, where family decrees are delivered, where the hierarchy of blood and title makes itself known in every detail, the height of the ceiling, the placement of the chairs, who sits and who stands. I had been in this majlis hundreds of times, but I had never been summoned. There is a difference, a significant, stomach-dropping difference. My father sat to the right of my uncle, Baba, the man whose name alone could silence a room, and he was not looking at me. That was the first sign. My father always looked at me when I entered. Always. He had sharp, dark eyes and a jawline carved from discipline, and no matter the occasion, he acknowledged my presence. That day, his eyes were fixed on the middle distance, his jaw set like concrete. My uncle was rotating his watch. I stood on the marble floor, Italian white marble. I remember the cold of it through the soles of my slippers. And I felt my heartbeat in places I didn't know a heartbeat could live. My throat, my fingertips, behind my eyes. My uncle did not look up immediately. He let me stand there. He let the silence build like pressure in a sealed room, let it press against my chest, let it teach me, remind me of my position in this world. Then slowly he raised his eyes, and he smiled. That warm, avuncular smile I had known since childhood. The smile that meant the watch was still turning. Habibti, he said softly. Sit. You look pale. I sat. He reached forward and poured tea from a silver pot, Moroccan mint, my favorite, and the fact that he knew that, the fact that this detail had been researched before this meeting, made the back of my neck go cold. Your future, he said, settling back, has been arranged. 4 words. Arranged, like furniture. Like a diplomatic shipment, like I was an object in a room that needed repositioning. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sheikh Mansour al-Rashid, my uncle continued, rotating the watch, has requested your hand. He is 61 years old, respected, deeply connected to the crown, and the marriage will be formalized in 40 days. 61. I was 23. Sheikh Mansour was older than my father. I had met him once at a state dinner. A heavy man with a thin beard and the eyes of someone who had never been denied anything. He had looked at me across the table the way a collector looks at an acquisition. Uncle, my voice cracked. Baba, My father's jaw tightened. Still, he would not look at me. "This is not a conversation," my uncle said, his voice dropping to that whisper I had feared since childhood. "This is a notification. The decree has already been signed." He slid a single document across the table. Gold-embossed letterhead. Royal seal in red wax. My name. Sheikh Mansour's name. And at the bottom, my father's signature. My father had signed it. Without telling me, without looking at me. I stared at that signature, that familiar slanted Arabic script I had watched sign birthday cards and travel documents in business empires. And something inside my chest simply snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Clean and sudden, like a bone. My knees gave out before I reached the door. The room spun, the chandelier above me blurred into a wheel of white light. The cold marble rushed up to meet my palms as I caught myself, and I remember thinking, in that strange dissociated clarity that comes with total devastation, this floor cost more than my freedom. A guard helped me up. He didn't speak. He didn't look at my face. Nobody looked at my face. That was the night I learned what powerless really meant. I want you to picture the most beautiful mosque you have ever seen. Now make it private. Make it yours. Meaning, no one else prays there unless invited. The carpets are hand-knotted Persian silk, so fine and so detailed that the pattern beneath your knees looks like a garden in full bloom, roses and vines and geometric perfection in crimson and gold. The walls are lined with hand-carved Arabic calligraphy, each letter gilded, each verse from the Quran rendered in gold leaf by a master craftsman who spent 4 years on this room alone. The mihrab, the prayer niche that indicates the direction of Mecca, is inlaid with mother of pearl and lapis lazuli, and when the morning light hits it at exactly the right angle, it seems to glow from within, like something holy lives inside the stone. This was our palace mosque. This was where I had prayed every single day of my life, and in the 40 days between my uncle's announcement and my wedding date, I came to this mosque and I did something I had never done before in my 23 years of perfect, disciplined, 5 times daily Islamic practice. I begged, not recited, not performed, not the mechanical, memorized Arabic of Fajr and Maghrib and Isha prayers that I had perfected before the age of 7. I mean, I pressed my forehead against that silk carpet, that garden of roses under my face, and I wept, open, ugly, desperate weeping, the kind that strips the dignity right off you, the kind that doesn't care about royal titles or silk abayas or what the servants might hear through the door. Allah, I whispered into the carpet, I am your servant. I have prayed every prayer. I have fasted every Ramadan. I have given zakah, the obligatory charity. I have worn the hijab since I was 9 years old. I have never questioned. I have never doubted. I have been obedient. Allah, if you can hear me, please, please do not let them give me to this man. Please. I am asking you. I am begging you. Silence, not the comfortable silence of peace, the silence of an empty room, the silence of a phone call that isn't connecting, the silence of screaming into a well and hearing nothing come back, not even your own echo. I pressed my forehead harder into the carpet. I dug my fingers into the silk fibers. I stayed in sujood, in prostration, the position of complete submission, until my neck ached and my tears had soaked a dark circle into the crimson roses beneath my face. Nothing. I prayed Fajr, the pre-dawn prayer, at 4 a.m, alone in that gilded room, watching the darkness outside the arched windows slowly bruise into purple, then gray, then gold. I prayed with everything I had. I recited Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran, the one every Muslim knows before they can walk, and I listened to my own voice in that high-ceilinged room, bouncing off all that gold and marble and mother of pearl, and it sounded hollow to me for the first time in my life, like an echo of a prayer rather than the prayer itself. Where was he? I had been raised to believe that Allah was Al-Qarib, the near one, that he was closer to me than my jugular vein. That was the phrase we were taught, closer than your jugular vein. I had believed it completely, without question, for 23 years. But kneeling on that carpet worth more money than most people see in a lifetime, in a mosque built specifically so that our family could access God without mixing with common people, I had never felt further from the divine in my life. Maybe, I thought, God is only for common people. Maybe the poor have him because they have nothing else, and I have everything else, and so I have nothing of him. I don't know why that thought made me cry harder, but it did. The days blurred. The wedding preparations did not. Our palace transformed. Florists arrived from the Netherlands with crates of white orchids. A catering team flew in from Paris. A famous Lebanese wedding planner took over the East Wing and turned it into something that looked like a dream. White and gold and achingly, mockingly beautiful. My measurements were taken for a gown I did not choose. My future mother-in-law sent jewelry, a diamond and emerald set that arrived in a velvet case the size of a suitcase, stones so large they looked artificial. My mother, Umi, sat with me one afternoon while the jeweler laid the pieces out on the table between us. She was a beautiful woman, my mother. Controlled, composed, the kind of beauty that comes from decades of discipline and excellent bone structure. She held one of the diamond earrings up to the light and turned it slowly. "Mashallah," she murmured, "by the grace of God. These are exceptional." "Umi," I said quietly, "I don't want to marry him." She set the earring down. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her abaya. She did not look at me when she spoke. "What you want," she said, in that even, final tone I knew better than to argue with, "is not the question being asked." I looked at my mother, this woman who had held me as a baby, who had read me Quran verses at bedtime, who had stroked my hair when I was sick, who I had loved with the uncomplicated totality that only a child can manage. And I saw it. Just for a fraction of a second, behind the composure, behind the discipline, behind the perfectly arranged expression of a royal wife who had long ago made her peace with powerlessness. I saw that she was drowning too. And somehow, that was the loneliest thing I had ever seen. I was surrounded by 200 people in this palace. Staff, guards, family members, advisors, religious scholars, wedding planners. 200 people moving through these marble corridors, filling these gilded rooms with noise and purpose and motion. And I had never, in my entire life, been so completely, devastatingly alone. I went back to the mosque that night. I prayed Aisha, the final prayer of the day, and then I sat in the silence, and I did something desperate and strange, and looking back now, I understand it was the Holy Spirit beginning to move even then. I didn't pray in Arabic. I prayed in my own voice. My actual voice, the one I used when I talked to myself in the dark, not the recitation voice, not the performance voice. I said, if there is a God who actually hears, not a God of gold and rules and royal approval, but a God who hears me, please find me, because I cannot find you. I didn't know it yet, but he had already heard, and he had already set something in motion. 3 floors above me, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in my late grandmother's sealed bedroom, something was waiting. A book. My grandmother died when I was 19. Her name was Sheikha Maryam, and she was the kind of woman who made entire rooms rearrange themselves around her presence, not through volume or demand, but through a quality I could never quite name when I was young. A stillness, a depth, like she was operating on a frequency that the rest of us couldn't quite tune into. She had dark, quiet eyes that seemed to hold things she had decided never to say, and she smelled always of amber and jasmine, a personal fragrance blended for her specifically by a perfumer in Grasse, France, who had been making it exclusively for her for 30 years. She was the only person in my family who ever asked me what I was thinking. Not what I was doing, not how my Quran recitation was progressing, not whether I was behaving appropriately in front of guests. She would sit beside me in her private garden, a walled courtyard filled with jasmine and pomegranate trees, impossibly fragrant, impossibly peaceful. And she would look at me with those quiet eyes and say, "Amira, What is happening inside you today? I adored her beyond language. When she died, her chambers were sealed per royal custom, locked, inventoried, preserved, until the male heirs decided what to do with her belongings. In our family, that process could take years. Her room sat untouched at the end of the third-floor corridor, behind a heavy wooden door with a brass handle that no one touched, in a wing of the palace that the younger staff considered quietly haunted. I had walked past that door 1,000 times. I had never gone in. Until the night, 10 days before my wedding, when I couldn't sleep. I want to tell you that what happened next was strategic, that I had a plan, that I was brave and deliberate and purposeful. But that would be a lie, and this testimony is built on nothing but truth. What happened was, I was wandering, 3 a.m. The palace at that hour is a different world. The staff skeleton crew moves in near silence. The guards rotate with the mechanical predictability of clockwork, and the marble corridors stretch out in the low security lighting like the corridors of a dream. My silk robe trailed behind me on the floor. I was barefoot. I remember the cold of the marble against my soles, the way it seemed to draw heat directly out of my body. I had been crying again, and I didn't want to go back to my room, and I had no destination. I was simply moving because standing still felt like surrendering to something I couldn't name, and I found myself at her door, my grandmother's door, the brass handle cold under my fingers, the wood old and solid and smelling faintly, even after 4 years, of amber and jasmine. I don't know why I tried it. I don't know what I expected. But the handle turned, a hinge creaked, and the door swung open into darkness, and a scent that hit me like a physical thing. Amber, jasmine, and something underneath it. Something older, like paper and time. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. The room was exactly as she had left it. Silk curtains, a dressing table with her perfume bottles still arranged in their precise order, her prayer rug rolled and placed in the corner, her reading chair by the window with a small table beside it, and on that table, a glass that had never been cleared, dried to a faint watermark ring. I crossed to her chair and I sat in it. I don't know why. I just needed to be near her. I pulled my knees to my chest, and I sat in my grandmother's reading chair at 3 a.m, and I cried the way you cry when you've run out of words, and what's left is just sound. And then I felt it beneath my foot. A give, a hollow sound, a floorboard that moved slightly, differently from the others, with a subtle flex that didn't match the solid stone beneath the rest of the room. I looked down. I pressed my foot against it again, that same flex, that same hollow knock. I don't know what made me kneel down. I don't know what made me press my fingers into the slight gap at the board's edge. I don't know what made me pull, but I did. The board came up with a soft resistance. It had been lifted before many times, the edges worn smooth. And in the cavity beneath it, wrapped in a square of green silk cloth that smelled of her perfume, was a book, not a Quran. I knew the weight and shape of a Quran in my hands before I could even see the cover. This was something else. I unwrapped the silk with fingers that had started to shake, and in the low spill of light from the corridor, I read the cover, the Holy Bible. I sat back on my heels on my grandmother's floor. My grandmother, the woman who had led our family Quran readings, the woman who had performed Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, the holiest act in Islam, 4 times. The woman whose faith had seemed to me as solid and immovable as the palace walls themselves. This was her book, hidden under her floorboard, wrapped in silk, kept for years. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I need you to understand the weight of what I was holding, not the physical weight. Though the book was thick and well worn, its pages soft with handling, its spine creased in multiple places, the marks of someone who had read it not once, but many times. I mean the other weight. The weight of what this meant in my world, in my family, in my kingdom. Possessing a Bible in Saudi Arabia, particularly in a royal household, was not simply forbidden. It was a declaration. It was a grenade. If this book had been found in my hands at that moment by any one of the guards rotating their rounds 2 floors below me, my wedding in 10 days would have been the least of my problems. I should have put it back. I should have rewrapped it in the green silk, pressed the floorboard down, walked out of that room, and gone back to my silk sheets and my suffocating life and my prearranged future, and I should have pretended I had never been there. I carried it back to my room beneath my robe, pressed against my heartbeat. The first night, I only opened the cover. I read the dedication page, then I closed it. My heart was hammering so hard I was certain someone in the corridor could hear it. I wrapped it in a spare abaya and pushed it to the back of my wardrobe and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until Fajr. The second night, I read the first page of Genesis and stopped. The third night, I couldn't wait for the servants to leave. I watched the clock. The moment the last set of footsteps faded down the corridor, I was out of bed. I checked my door. Locked. I checked the small camera mounted in the upper corner of my room, angled toward the entrance, not toward the bed, a detail I had casually confirmed weeks earlier during a routine security review, without knowing why I needed to know it. I pulled the Bible from under my mattress. I pulled the sheet up around me. I turned on my phone flashlight and aimed it down into the tent of fabric, and I read like a criminal, like a fugitive, like someone whose life depended on the words on the page, because in a very real sense, it did. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. John 3:16. I had to read it 3 times. Whoever. Not whoever is worthy. Not whoever is royal. Not whoever has performed all the correct rituals in all the correct positions. Whoever. I pressed my hand flat against the page, like I could feel the words through my palm. Then Ephesians 2:8-9. My grandmother had underlined it, in pencil, lightly, with the careful hand of someone who knew the risk of the mark, but couldn't stop themselves from making it. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. I had spent 23 years earning my way to God, 23 years of perfect performance, perfect recitation, perfect ritual, and here was a book, hidden by my own grandmother, saying that none of it was the point, that it was never about earning, that it was a gift. My entire theological universe cracked down the middle like a fault line shifting. My whole life I had been taught that Jesus, Isa, as we called him, was a prophet, honored, yes, significant, yes, but human, entirely and only human. But this book, this worn, silk-wrapped, pencil-underlined, hidden under the floorboard book, said something so different, so enormous, so structurally incompatible with everything I had been taught, that I had to set it down and press both hands over my mouth. It said he was God, not a prophet pointing toward God, God himself, stepping down, coming here, for me. I sat with that sentence for a very long time in the dark, under my silk sheets, in my palace, 8 days before my forced wedding, with my flashlight illuminating the penciled underlines of a dead woman I had loved more than almost anyone on earth. And I thought, Teta, grandmother, what did you know that you never told me? And for the first time in weeks, in months, in what felt like my entire life, I felt something other than hollow. I felt the faintest, most fragile, most terrifying flicker of something I couldn't name yet. Something that felt, impossibly, like hope. I need to stop here for a moment. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something. And I need you to actually think about it, not just let it pass over you, like background noise. Have you ever been in a moment so dark, so completely without exit, that you stopped performing hope and just let go, not gave up? That's different. I mean the specific moment when you stop pretending to be okay, stop managing your own survival, stop gripping the edges of your own life with white knuckles, and you simply open your hands and say, I cannot do this anymore. Whatever is out there, I am done doing this alone. If you have, then what I'm about to tell you, you will understand immediately, in your bones, before I even finish the sentence. If you haven't, stay with me, because you need to hear this. It was the 6th night with the Bible, 5 days before my wedding. I had read the Gospel of John from beginning to end, twice. I had read it the way a drowning person reads a map, desperately, hungrily, with shaking hands and burning eyes, looking for something solid to grab onto. And with every chapter, something was happening inside me that I didn't have a framework for. Every wall I had been raised behind, every theological certainty, every religious boundary, every "this is haram, this is forbidden, this is the line you do not cross," was developing fractures, fine ones at first, then wider, then the kind you can put your whole hand into. The servants had left at 10, my room was locked, the Bible was open on my lap, the flashlight casting its small warm circle on the pages. Outside my window, the Riyadh night was absolute. That specific desert darkness that feels heavier than other darkness. A sky full of stars so bright they looked artificial above the palace grounds. The date palms along the outer wall, standing perfectly still in windless air. It was somewhere past 2 a.m. when I closed the Bible and set it on the bed beside me, and I just sat there. The room around me was extraordinary by any human standard. 12-foot ceilings, hand-painted murals along the upper walls, floral patterns in gold and ivory commissioned from an artist in Florence, silk curtains in deep burgundy, floor-to-ceiling, pooling slightly on the marble, a vanity table covered in perfume bottles worth collectively more than most people's cars. My wedding dress, I hadn't chosen it, but it had been brought in and hung on a silk-padded hanger on the wardrobe door, a confection of ivory and gold thread that cost 400,000 riyals, and that I could not look at without feeling the walls close in. I had everything. I had never felt more like nothing in my life. I set the Bible down. I moved from the bed to the floor, not to my prayer rug, not the automatic, ritual positioning of Islamic prayer that my body knew the way it knew breathing. I just knelt on the bare Persian rug, hand-knotted $250,000, a garden of midnight blue and gold beneath my knees. I knelt the way a child kneels, without form, without protocol, without the correct Arabic words in the correct order. I pressed my forehead to the rug, and I said in my own voice, in Arabic, barely above a breath, "Jesus, Isa, if what this book says is true, if you are who it says you are, then you already know everything about me. You know my name, you know this room, you know what they're going to do to me in 5 days, and you know that I have nowhere left to go." I paused. My tears were soaking into the rug's fibers. I don't know how to pray to you. I don't know the right words. I don't know if I'm even allowed. I've been told my whole life that what I'm doing right now is the worst thing a Muslim can do. But I'm asking you anyway. If you're real, if you're actually real and not just words in a book, then I need you to be real right now. Because I am running out of time and I am running out of me. Silence. The room was absolutely still. I stayed with my forehead on the rug. 10 seconds, 20, a minute. The marble beyond the rug's edge was cold. My knees were starting to ache. The wedding dress on the wardrobe door was visible from the corner of my eye, that ivory and gold monstrosity, that 400,000 rial symbol of everything I was powerless to stop. And then the air changed. I know how that sounds. I know. I lived in a world of extreme rationality and extreme control, where everything was documented and managed and explained and ordered. I'm telling you what happened, not what I can explain. And what happened was, the air in that room changed. It didn't get colder the way you might expect. It got warm. A warmth that had texture to it. That's the only way I know to describe it. Like the warmth wasn't just temperature, but substance. Like the air itself became something you could feel against your skin the way you feel water. A presence rather than an absence. The hair on my arms rose, and I became aware, with a certainty that bypassed thought entirely and went straight to the deepest, oldest part of me, the part that existed before language, before religion, before royal titles and palace walls. I became aware that I was not alone. I raised my head slowly. He was standing by the window. I have tried to write this moment many times, in journals I've since had to destroy, in prayers, in conversations with pastors who leaned forward in their chairs and said, keep going, and every time, language fails me in the same place. Not because I didn't see clearly. I saw more clearly in that moment than I have ever seen anything in my life, before or since. But because what I saw was operating in a register that human words were not built to carry. I will tell you what I can. He was not what I expected. Having grown up in palaces, having been in the physical presence of kings and crown princes and heads of state, I know what power looks like when it dresses itself in earthly clothes, the tailored suits, the military regalia, the gold and the titles and the practiced posture of men who have been told since birth that they are above other men. I know that performance intimately. I was raised inside it. This was nothing like that. He wore simple clothing. There was no regalia, no gold, no markers of rank that my world would have recognized. And yet, and I need you to understand this, I have never, in 23 years of living inside actual royalty, been in the presence of anything that radiated authority the way he did. It wasn't performed, it wasn't constructed. It came from him the way light comes from the sun, not because the sun is trying to illuminate anything, but simply because that is what the sun is. He was more regal than every king I had ever stood before, and he was looking at me, not at the room, not at the palace, not at the royal title or the silk robe or the crown princess who lived inside these walls. He was looking at me, the me that existed underneath all of that, the me that had been kneeling on this rug with tears and a flashlight and a borrowed Bible, the me that nobody in this palace had ever actually seen. And he said my name, Amira. Not your highness, not Bint, his royal highness, not the title that had defined every interaction of my entire life, that had shaped how every person in my world spoke to me and looked at me and handled me. Just my name, the name my grandmother had whispered over me when I was small, the name that belonged to the girl before the title, Amira. And I broke. I don't mean I cried harder, though I did. I mean something structural gave way inside me, some load-bearing wall that had been holding up a version of myself I had been performing for 23 years. The obedient daughter, the perfect Muslim, the compliant princess, the girl who asked no questions and made no trouble and recited her prayers and wore her abayas and waited to be assigned a life. That wall simply came down, all at once, completely. I was sobbing in a way I had never sobbed before, the kind of crying that doesn't come from sadness exactly, but from release, from something enormous and compressed and long imprisoned, finally finding an exit. And he spoke again, not in a voice that my ears processed the way they process sound. It was more like words that arrived already inside me, already understood, bypassing the usual machinery of hearing. You have been looking for me in the wrong places. I have always been here. I have been here every morning on that carpet. I have heard every prayer you thought went unanswered. I was always listening. You were never alone, not once. I pressed both hands over my mouth. You are not what they made you. You are not the title. You are not the decree. You are not the wedding or the palace or the inheritance. You are mine, and what I have for you cannot be taken by any king. I tried to speak. What came out wasn't words. It was just sound. The sound of a person who has been holding their breath for 23 years finally exhaling. He looked at me with eyes that held, I don't know how to say this without it sounding inadequate, everything. Not judgment, not the conditional regard I had received my entire life, the love that came with performance requirements and behavioral clauses, and the ever-present possibility of withdrawal. Just everything. Complete knowledge and complete acceptance existing simultaneously, which I had not known was possible, which I had not known I was starving for until it was given to me. And then he was gone. The room was the same room, the silk curtains, the painted ceiling, the wedding dress on the wardrobe door, the Persian rug beneath my knees, damp now with tears. But I was not the same person. I knelt on that rug for a long time after, not performing prayer, not reciting anything, just breathing, just being present in a body that felt, for the first time, like it actually belonged to me. The Bible was still open on the bed, in the circle of my flashlight, the page it had fallen open to. I hadn't chosen it. It had simply fallen that way, held 3 words that I read from across the room, and felt land in the center of my chest, like something that had always been true and had simply been waiting for me to find it. It is finished. I had been surrounded by royalty my entire life. I had stood in throne rooms and state chambers and gilded halls. I had been in the presence of men who held the power of life and death over thousands of people. I had never, until that night, been in the presence of true royalty. And now that I knew what it felt like, I understood, with a clarity that nothing and no one has ever been able to take from me since. There was no going back. The morning of the family tribunal, I woke before Fajr. Not because an alarm woke me, not because a servant knocked. I simply opened my eyes in the darkness of my chamber at 4 a.m, 4 days after the night Jesus stood by my window, and I was awake, fully, completely, with a clarity that had no business existing in a body that hadn't slept more than 2 hours. I lay still for a moment, looking up at my painted ceiling, at the gold and ivory florals disappearing into the pre-dawn dark above me, and I took a long, slow breath. I was not afraid. That was the thing that surprised me most. I had been afraid for so long, a low, constant background fear that had become so familiar I had stopped recognizing it as fear and started experiencing it simply as the baseline texture of being alive. Fear of my uncle, fear of the decree, fear of Sheikh Mansour's eyes across a dinner table, fear of the wedding, fear of the book under my mattress, fear of my own thoughts. That morning, it was gone, not replaced by confidence exactly, not replaced by certainty about outcomes or safety or what was coming, just gone. In its place was something quieter and sturdier and harder to name. The closest I can come is this. It felt like standing on ground that you suddenly understood went all the way down, that no matter what was built on top of it or torn away from it, the ground itself was not going anywhere. I got up, I bathed, I dressed in my abaya, not one of the embroidered Balmain pieces, not the gold-threaded Givenchy, a simple black one, my own choice. I sat at my mirror and I looked at my face for a long time, the face of a princess, the face of a woman 2 days from a wedding she hadn't chosen, the face of someone who had, 4 nights ago, been in the presence of the living God in this very room. Whatever happens today, I said to that face quietly, you know what you know, and no one can take that from you. Then Noor came to my door. Her face told me everything before she spoke. Your Highness, she whispered, they found the Bible. I need to tell you how it happened because the how matters. My cousin Dahlia, 20 years old, sharp-eyed, and deeply loyal to my uncle, in the way that people are loyal to power when they have learned that power is the only reliable currency, had been in my room 2 days earlier for what was presented as a friendly visit. We had sat together, drunk tea, talked about the wedding preparations in the careful, surface-level way that women in my family talked about everything. And when she left, something had shifted in the weight of the room. I felt it but dismissed it. She had looked under the mattress while I was in the bathroom. She had told my uncle that same evening. My uncle had waited 2 days. That was the thing about Prince Khalid. He never reacted immediately. He let information age. He let you believe you were safe. He let the normal rhythms of palace life continue. The meals, the wedding preparations, the florists, and the catering teams, and the jeweler. And then, when the contrast between normalcy and catastrophe was at its absolute maximum, he moved. The tribunal was convened at 9 a.m. in the formal majlis. The gold-embossed invitation, and yes, it was presented as an invitation. That was how my family operated. Every act of violence dressed in the language of formality was slid under my door at 7 a.m. I read it once. I set it on my dressing table. I picked up the Bible from beneath my mattress. I was done hiding it. I was done being a criminal in my own room for holding truth in my hands. And I read 3 verses. Then I placed it in the inside pocket of my abaya, against my ribs, next to my heartbeat. And I walked to the majlis. The hallway to the formal majlis was 200 meters long. I had walked it hundreds of times, for celebrations, for state dinners, for family gatherings, where the politics moved beneath the surface of the food, and the conversation like currents under still water. I knew every meter of it, the alcoves with their displays of ancient Arabian artifacts, the portraits of my grandfather and great-grandfather in their royal regalia, the point 3/4 of the way down, where the marble changed from white Carrara to pale gold onyx, marking the transition into the formal wing. I counted my steps the way I had counted them as a child, learning the dimensions of my own world. 154 steps. At step 91, a guard fell into pace slightly behind me and to my left. Standard protocol for a royal family member moving through the formal wing. I didn't look at him. At step 112, he spoke, not loudly, barely above the sound of our footsteps. Your Highness, a pause. May God be with you today. I turned my head slightly. He was looking straight ahead, face perfectly neutral, the practiced blankness of a man paid to be invisible. But in 17 years of living in this palace, no guard had ever said that to me, not once. Not may God be with you. The standard palace formality was as you wish, Your Highness, or this way, Your Highness, or nothing at all. I faced forward again, my hand pressed briefly against my ribs, against the outline of the book beneath my abaya. 154 steps. I opened the door. They were all there. My uncle Prince Khalid, seated at the head of the room in the largest chair, not quite a throne, but arranged and lit and positioned to function as one. His heavy gold Rolex catching the chandelier light. His eyes on me from the moment I entered. His expression, the one I knew best and feared most, absolutely, perfectly calm. My father, to his right, Baba, whose signature had been on my marriage decree, who still, even now, even here, would not hold my gaze for more than a half-second before looking away. And in that half-second, I caught it. The thing I had glimpsed on my mother's face weeks earlier. The drowning. My father was drowning too, had been drowning for years, was so deep under the water of this family and this system and this man sitting to his left that he had forgotten there was a surface. To my uncle's left, a religious scholar, one of our private imams, Sheikh Abdul Rahman, a narrow man with a long beard and small eyes who had been advising our family for 30 years, and whose religious rulings had never once, in my memory, inconvenienced the powerful. 3 cousins along the right wall, 2 senior household guards at the rear doors, and Dahlia, seated in the corner, not quite meeting my eyes. The watch on my uncle's wrist had already started turning. I walked to the center of the room and stood on the pale gold onyx floor, and I did not bow my head. My uncle observed this. His watch turned. Sit, Amira, he said softly. I'll stand, Uncle. The temperature in the room dropped 3 degrees. I felt it. Everyone felt it. One of my cousins shifted in his seat. My uncle's expression didn't change. He let the silence do its work for a long moment, then reached forward and placed an object on the low table between us. Not the Bible, a photograph. Printed from a security camera feed, grainy but unmistakable. Me, in my grandmother's room, on my knees on her floor, with the Bible open in my hands. This was taken, my uncle said pleasantly, 4 nights ago. Would you like to explain what we're looking at? I don't think I need to, I said. I think you already know what you're looking at. Beside my uncle, Sheikh Abdul Rahman inhaled sharply. My father's jaw tightened. In the corner, Dahlia's eyes finally found the floor. My uncle set down his tea glass. He stood. Prince Khalid was not a tall man, not physically imposing the way some men are. But when he stood in a room, he occupied it entirely, the way a change in air pressure occupies a space, everywhere, all at once, and impossible to ignore. He walked toward me slowly, hands clasped behind his back, and stopped 3 feet away. He studied my face with those still, dark eyes, Then he said, very quietly, "I am going to ask you once, out of respect for your father, out of respect for your grandmother's memory. Yes, we know whose book that was. Out of respect for 23 years of your life in this family, I am going to ask you once, and your answer will determine everything that follows." A pause. The watch on his wrist caught the light. "Renounce this. Renounce the book. Renounce whatever has been put in your head. Renounce this Jesus, and we will proceed with the wedding, and this conversation will never have happened. Do you understand what I am offering you?" I understood exactly what he was offering me. He was offering me the cage with the door still open, and standing in that room with the Bible pressed against my ribs and the memory of warm air and my own name spoken by a voice that knew every chamber of my soul, I felt something move through me from the base of my spine to the crown of my head. Not anger, not defiance, something cleaner and deeper than either of those. I looked at my uncle. Then I looked at my father, and this time Baba looked back. And what I saw in his eyes in that moment was not anger. It was grief. Pure, old, bottomless grief. The grief of a man watching something happen that some part of him had always known was coming and had spent 23 years trying to prevent. "Baba," I said softly, just to him, just for a second. His jaw worked. He said nothing. I turned back to my uncle. I renounced the lies I was raised with. The room went absolutely still. I renounced the idea that God is a performance. I renounced the idea that truth can be locked behind a decree. I renounced 23 years of reciting words I wasn't allowed to question. My voice was steady. I don't know how. I know who. Jesus is Lord. He is the Son of God. He stood in my room 4 nights ago, and he spoke my name, and he is more real than anything in this palace. And he is worth more. He is worth infinitely more than everything in this kingdom. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then my uncle raised his hand. The guard at the rear door stepped forward, and my father stood up from his chair. "Khalid." One word, my father's voice, quiet and absolute. My uncle turned. His eyes went to his brother's face. Something moved between them, something old and deep and complicated, the entire architecture of their relationship visible for a fraction of a second in the air between them. "Khalid," my father said again, "she is my daughter." The watch stopped turning. My uncle looked at my father for a long moment. Then he looked at me, and in his face, just for that one fraction of a second that I told you I would watch for, that one moment of humanity, I saw it. Not softness exactly, but something behind the control, behind the power, behind the decades of absolute authority. Something that looked, just briefly, like exhaustion, like a man who was also, in his own way, trapped inside the system he enforced. Then it was gone. He turned away from me and spoke to the guards. "Remove her to the east wing. No communications, no visitors." He walked to the door. Before he left, without turning around, "The wedding is canceled. The succession documents will be amended by morning, effective immediately. She has no title, no inheritance, and no place in this family." The door closed behind him. The room let out a breath. My father was still standing. He looked at me across the space between us, across the pale gold onyx floor, across the chandelier light, across 23 years, and his face held something I had no category for and have spent a long time since trying to name. He crossed the room in 6 steps, and he gripped my face in both his hands, not gently, not cruelly, just with the intensity of a man holding something he knows he is about to lose, and he looked at me for 3 seconds. Then he released me. He walked to the door. He did not look back. The guards took my arms, and as they walked me toward the east wing, toward the locked rooms at the end of the corridor where people in my family went to disappear, I felt the Bible against my ribs, steady as a heartbeat. And I heard, inside me in a voice I had come to recognize, "I am with you, even here, especially here. The east wing smelled different from the rest of the palace. I noticed it the moment the guards walked me through the connecting corridor, and the heavy security door closed behind us with a sound that was not loud, but was very, very final. The rest of the palace smelled of oud and rosewater and expensive food, and the particular metallic cleanliness of wealth, the smell of surfaces that are polished daily by hands that are paid to make everything perfect. The east wing smelled of age and stillness, of air that didn't move much, of rooms that had been closed too long. It was still luxurious. I want to be clear about that, because I think people imagine palace imprisonment as a dungeon, as stone walls and chains, as something from a medieval movie. It wasn't. The room they put me in had silk wallpaper, pale gold, hand-printed, and a bed with an embroidered coverlet, and a bathroom with Italian fixtures, and a window that looked out over the palace gardens where the date palms stood in their perfect rows. There was a crystal glass on the bedside table. There was a vase of white orchids left over from the wedding preparations, already beginning to wilt. It was a beautiful cage, and the door was locked from the outside. They had taken my phone. They had taken my laptop. They had taken, after a thorough search conducted by 2 female household staff, with the mechanical efficiency of people following orders they were not permitted to question, every item in my possession that could connect me to the outside world. They had not taken the Bible. I don't know if they missed it or if someone chose not to see it. But when the search was finished and the staff left, and the lock turned, I reached inside my abaya, and it was still there, still pressed against my ribs, still warm from my body. I held it against my chest like it was breathing. For 2 days I saw no one except the staff member who brought meals 3 times a day on a tray. Real meals, proper palace food, because even in imprisonment, my family maintained the performance of civilization. She was young, maybe 18, with careful eyes that absorbed everything and gave nothing back. She set the tray down, collected the previous one, and left without speaking. The first day, I tried to catch her gaze. The second day, as she turned to go, I said quietly, "What is your name?" She stopped. Her back was still to me. A long pause. "Precious," she said, almost inaudibly. And then she was gone. Precious, a Filipino name. I catalogued it and held it carefully in my mind like a small, fragile object. The third day, she set down my lunch tray, and as she straightened, a folded piece of paper fell from beneath the plate. It was not an accident. The motion was too deliberate, too practiced, the paper placed too precisely. She walked out. The lock turned. I crossed the room and unfolded the paper. 4 words, written in small, careful English letters. I know. I pray. Her full name was Precious Domingo. She had been working in our palace for 6 years, sent from Manila at the age of 17 through a labor recruitment agency, one of the hundreds of thousands of migrant workers, Filipino, Pakistani, Indian, Sri Lankan, Ethiopian, who form the invisible infrastructure of Gulf wealth. The people who cook the Michelin-starred meals and polish the Italian marble and change the silk sheets and carry the trays and are almost never looked at directly by the people they serve. She was a Christian, had been her entire life, raised in a Catholic family in Cebu, had attended church every Sunday until the day she boarded a plane to Riyadh because her family needed the money and the salary here was 12 times what she could earn at home. For 6 years she had practiced her faith in secret in the small room she shared with 2 other household staff in the service wing, with a Bible she kept inside a hollowed-out cooking manual on her shelf, praying quietly after midnight when she was certain everyone around her was asleep. I didn't know any of this yet. I learned it later, piece by piece. What I knew in that moment, holding that folded piece of paper in my locked room in the East Wing, was that somewhere in this palace there was one other person who believed what I believed, and that one person was enough. The note system developed over 3 days. Tiny folded papers, no longer than a sentence or 2 each, passed beneath the lunch tray, or tucked into the folded napkin, or once, written on the inside of the orchid wrapper, when the wilted flowers were replaced with fresh ones. We were building something in fragments, in stolen seconds, in the spaces between the surveillance. "Is there a way out?" I wrote. "There is always a way, I am asking him. They will be watching you. They do not see me. They never see me. That sentence landed in my chest like a stone dropped in still water, the ripples spreading outward in every direction. They never see me. 6 years in this palace, invisible by design. And that invisibility, the thing that had been used against her, the thing that diminished her in the eyes of everyone who passed her in these corridors without acknowledgement, that invisibility was about to become the most powerful tool in this story. On the 4th day, her note said, Sunday, laundry delivery, 5 a.m., bring nothing. I read it 3 times. Then I pressed it between my palms, closed my eyes, and said simply, Jesus, this is your plan. I'm trusting you with it completely. I slept better that night than I had in months. Sunday arrived the way Sundays do in the Gulf, indistinguishable from every other day of the week in terms of commerce and palace routine, the call to prayer marking the hours with the same mechanical regularity, the guards rotating with the same clockwork precision. But at 4:30 in the morning, I was awake and dressed. Simple clothes, the plainest abaya I had, flat shoes, nothing that marked me as anything other than a member of the household staff moving through the service corridors in the pre-dawn dark. The Bible went inside my abaya, against my ribs, where it had been for days. At exactly 5 a.m., I heard the service elevator at the end of the East Wing corridor engage. The soft mechanical hum that meant the laundry delivery from the outside contractors was coming up. This happened every Sunday without fail. I had heard it every Sunday of my life in this palace without ever thinking about it. Now I understood that God had been filing this detail away for me for years, waiting for the morning I would need it. The lock on my door opened from the outside. Precious stood in the doorway in her uniform, a large laundry cart beside her, her face absolutely composed. She had the calm of someone who had prayed about this moment so thoroughly that she had already surrendered the outcome entirely. She looked at me. She nodded once. Lie flat in the bottom, she said quietly. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Whatever happens. I climbed into the laundry cart and lay flat, and Precious covered me with a layer of folded linens, heavy, white, smelling of industrial detergent and warmth from the dryers, and she wheeled me down the service corridor toward the delivery entrance. I lay in the dark under those linens, and I did not make a sound. I heard the wheels of the cart on marble, then on the rougher surface of the service corridor, then the bump of a door frame. The distant call to prayer beginning its first wavering note outside, Fajr, the dawn prayer, the one I had prayed on silk carpets in a gilded mosque every morning of my life. The brief exchange of words between Precious and the delivery contractor at the entrance, mundane, routine, the kind of exchange that happens 10,000 times a day in buildings like this, invisible by design. The cold, pre-dawn air hitting the gap at the cart's edge and reaching me under the linens like a message. Outside. This is what outside smells like. And then the wheels on asphalt. And then a door opening, a vehicle, I could tell by the sound of it, a van, and Precious's hands on my arm, pulling me up, pulling me out, and the pre-dawn Riyadh sky above me, vast and dark and scattered with stars that had no idea what was happening beneath them. Go, Precious whispered. He's waiting, the gray van. Go. I grabbed her hand, just for a second. I pressed it hard between both of mine. She shook her head. Don't. Just go. You risked everything, I said. She looked at me with those 6 years invisible eyes, and she said simply, Jesus told me to. The man in the gray van was named Daniel, a South Korean missionary who had been operating an underground network for converted Muslims in the Gulf region for 11 years, moving people from safe house to safe house, arranging emergency asylum contacts at embassies, communicating through a system so carefully constructed that it had never once been compromised. He was 40 years old, with calm hands and a thermos of terrible instant coffee, and he handed me a cup of it as I climbed into the passenger seat, and he said, in accented Arabic, "Welcome, sister. You're safe now." I burst into tears over terrible instant coffee in a gray van in a Riyadh service alley at 5:15 in the morning. Daniel drove without rushing. the specific, calibrated unhurriedness of someone who understood that urgency is its own kind of visibility. He drove through the pre-dawn streets while I sat in the passenger seat and watched my city move past the window. Riyadh at 5 in the morning, the wide boulevards empty of their usual congestion, the glass towers of the business district catching the first gray light, the minarets of the mosques with their speakers silent between the calls. A city I had lived inside my entire life and seen almost nothing of, moving past me through a van window like a film I was watching for the first time. I pressed my hand flat against the glass. Goodbye, I thought, to no one specific, to all of it. The embassy took 11 hours. I will not tell you which one. I will not tell you which country gave me asylum, not because I am ungrateful, but because the people who helped me are still helping others, and their safety matters more than the completeness of my story. What I will tell you is that Daniel's contacts were precise and prepared, that the paperwork had been arranged in advance through channels that I did not understand and did not ask about, and that at 4:17 in the afternoon, I sat in a clean, fluorescent-lit room in a building with a different flag flying outside, and a woman across the table from me said, in English, "You are now under our protection." I had not slept in 32 hours. I was wearing a plain black abaya and flat shoes, and I had the Bible pressed against my ribs, and I had nothing else in the world. I said in English that surprised me with its steadiness, "Thank you." My mother's message arrived through a cousin's phone 3 weeks later, when I was already out of the country. One sentence. "You are dead to me." I sat with that sentence for a long time. I want to be honest with you about what it did to me, because I think there is a version of this testimony where I tell you I read it and felt only peace, only the supernatural comfort of God filling every space that grief might have occupied. And God's comfort was real. It was absolutely real. And I also want to tell you that I put that phone down and I folded my arms on the table in front of me and I pressed my forehead into them and I cried for a very long time, for my mother's face, for the smell of her perfume, for the jasmine courtyard of my grandmother's garden, for Noor, my maid of 12 years, whose fate after my escape I did not know and feared to imagine, for Precious, still in that palace, still invisible, still folding linens and praying after midnight, for my father, whose face in the majlis, that 6-second look, those 6 steps across the pale gold onyx, his hands on my face, I replayed in my mind more times than I can count. $400 million, gone. Every title, every inheritance, every marker of the life I had been born into. My mother, who had held me as a baby, telling me I was dead. The grief was real, I need you to know that. Faith does not cancel grief. Jesus himself wept, and I wept. And then, when the weeping was finished, I picked up the Bible from the table beside me, worn now, its spine more creased than ever, a new water stain on the cover from the tears of that afternoon. And I opened it, and I read, and he was there, the same presence, the same warmth, the same voice that knew my name without my title. "I am your family now," he said. "You are not an orphan. You are not alone. You have never been alone." I lost a palace. I gained a father. I lost billions. I gained eternity. And somewhere in a service wing in Riyadh, a Filipino woman named Precious was folding linens and praying after midnight. And I prayed for her every single day. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment now. No marble floors. Laminate. The kind that clicks slightly when you walk on it in certain spots, near the kitchen, where it hasn't been laid quite evenly. I noticed it the first week, and I thought I would find it annoying. And I never did. I find it, if I'm being completely honest with you, one of the most comforting sounds in my life. That small, imperfect click. The sound of a floor that belongs to a real life. A life with edges and imperfections, and the specific, ordinary beauty of something that was never designed to impress anyone. My ceiling is 9 feet high, not 30, not painted by a Florentine artist. White emulsion, slightly uneven in one corner where a previous tenant must have had a water leak, and I have not fixed it because every time I look at it, I feel something that takes me a moment to identify, and then I recognize it. Gratitude. Pure, uncomplicated, overwhelming gratitude for a ceiling that is mine. I have one plant on the windowsill, a small succulent that a woman from my church gave me when I arrived. I have kept it alive for 14 months, which is, genuinely, one of my proudest achievements. I cook my own food. I wash my own dishes. I take my own laundry to the machine in the building's basement, and I wait for it and I carry it back up myself. And the first time I did this, the first time I stood in that basement laundry room with its fluorescent light and its institutional smell of detergent, I thought of Precious. I thought of her hands on laundry carts in palace corridors, 6 years of invisibility, and I stood in that basement and I said out loud, to the empty room, "Thank you. Thank you for using her. Thank you for seeing her when no one else did." I want to tell you what my days look like now, because I think it matters. I think the texture of the ordinary life on the other side of the miracle matters as much as the miracle itself, maybe more. I wake up without an alarm most mornings, early, when the light is still gray and the apartment is quiet. I make coffee. I have become, somewhat embarrassingly, very particular about my coffee, which is perhaps the one remnant of a life of high standards that I have permitted myself. I sit by my window with my coffee and my Bible, and I read. Not by flashlight, hidden under silk sheets, with my heart hammering at every footstep in the corridor outside. I read in the morning light, at my own table, in my own home, with my door unlocked and my window open, and the sound of the street below coming up to meet me. Ordinary sounds, city sounds, the sounds of a world going about its business without reference to royal decrees or family honor codes, or the slow rotation of a gold Rolex watch. I read my Bible in the open, and no one is coming to take it from me. I want to stop on that sentence for a moment because I don't think its weight is immediately obvious if you grew up somewhere that freedom of belief is simply the water you swim in, invisible because it's everywhere. Reading my Bible in the open and no one is coming to take it from me. Do you understand what that is? Do you understand the specific, enormous, everyday miracle of that? Because I did not understand it until I had lived its opposite, until I had lain under silk sheets in a 214-room palace with a flashlight aimed at these pages like a criminal. Every morning at that window, with that coffee, with those pages open in the light, I am undone by it, every single morning. 14 months, and it has not become ordinary. I pray it never does. I go to church on Sundays. A small church, maybe 80 people. A rented space above a community center. Stackable chairs, and a slightly out-of-tune keyboard, and a pastor who prints the sermon notes on paper that always seems to be slightly the wrong size for the handout template. It is, by any objective measure, the least impressive religious institution I have ever set foot in. I have wept in that room more times than I can count, not from sadness, from the specific, overwhelming sensation of belonging somewhere for the first time, of sitting in a stackable chair next to people who know my story, not my title, not my family name, not the number of my palace rooms or the value of my Hermes collection, my story. The real one, the one that started on a Persian rug at 2 a.m. with my forehead pressed to the silk fibers and a desperate whispered prayer to a God I wasn't sure was listening. They know that story. And they stayed. Do you understand what it means, after a lifetime in a world where love was always conditional, where affection came attached to performance requirements and behavioral clauses, and the ever-present possibility of withdrawal, to sit in a room full of people who know your worst and your most broken and your most frightened and your most desperate, and who stay, who bring you casseroles when you're sick, who call on a Tuesday for no reason, who sit with you on the floor of your laminate-floored apartment at midnight when the grief ambushes you, and it does ambush you. It comes without warning sometimes, a smell or a song or a particular quality of evening light that reaches directly into your chest and takes hold of something, and who don't try to fix it or rush it or explain it away, who simply sit with you in it and say, "We're here, and he's here, and that is enough." I did not know that kind of love existed before Jesus showed me it did. I know it now. I live inside it. Every ordinary, laminate floored, slightly out of tune keyboard day of my life. There are days I miss my mother. I want to be honest about this because I think testimonies sometimes skip this part, rush past it in the direction of the triumph and the peace and the altar call, and I understand why. The triumph is real, the peace is real, but the missing is also real, and I think you need to hear it. There are days when I am standing in my kitchen making rice, ordinary rice, in an ordinary pot on an ordinary stove, and the smell of it takes me back to our palace kitchen on the nights when the chef made something traditional, something that smelled like home in the oldest, deepest sense of the word. And my mother would sometimes come to the kitchen, which was unusual. She rarely came to the kitchen, and she would stand at the counter and taste things off a spoon with the focused, critical expression of a woman who knew exactly how things should be. And occasionally she would smile, and that smile was everything. I miss that smile. I miss the smell of her perfume, amber and something floral, the signature scent she'd worn my entire life. I miss her hands. I miss the way she said my name in the morning when she was not performing for anyone, just a mother saying her daughter's name. I miss Noor, who changed my silk sheets every Tuesday for 12 years, and who looked at a Bible on a marble floor with terror in her eyes because she was afraid for me, not for herself. I have not been able to find out what happened to her. I pray for her every day. If she is watching this somehow, Noor, you were seen, you were loved, you were never just staff to me. I miss my grandmother's jasmine garden, the smell of it in the early evening when the heat began to break and the flowers released their fragrance into the air, and it mixed with the oud from the palace and the distant sound of the adhan, and for a few minutes the whole world smelled like something ancient and holy. I miss 100 small things from a life I can never return to. And here is what I have learned about missing things. Grief and gratitude are not opposites. They are not in competition. You can hold them both at the same time. You can miss your mother's smile and be utterly, completely, overwhelmingly grateful for the life you are living. You can grieve a jasmine garden and wake up every morning undone with thankfulness for your laminate floor. The heart is large enough for both. Jesus did not ask me to stop loving the people who hurt me or stop grieving the life I left. He asked me to trust that He is sufficient in the missing, and He is. He is sufficient in every season and every texture of loss. When the grief ambushes me, and it does, I have learned to turn toward it rather than away from it, to take it to Him directly, to say, "This is what I'm carrying today, and I need you to carry it with me." And every time, without exception, I am met. The presence I felt in my room that night at 2 a.m, that warmth with texture, that company that knows your name without your title. It is not confined to miraculous moments in gilded palace bedrooms. It is here, in this apartment, in this ordinary morning, in this grief, in this missing. He is always here. Now I need to talk directly to you, not to the general audience, to you, the specific person watching this right now, in whatever room you're in, on whatever device, at whatever hour, because I believe, with everything in me, that you did not find this video by accident. If you are watching this from a palace, and I know some of you are, I know my story reaches into places I never expected, because I've received the messages, the anonymous ones, the ones sent through 3 layers of indirection by people who are afraid to sign their names. If you are watching this from inside a world of extreme wealth and absolute control, if you are sitting on silk sheets or marble floors, or in a majlis where power moves beneath the surface like a current, if you are performing a life that looks like paradise from the outside and feels like suffocation from the inside, I was you. Not metaphorically, literally, I was you. The designer abayas, the gold plates, the private mosque, the prayers that echoed off expensive surfaces and reached nothing. I was exactly you, and I need to tell you something that nobody in your world is allowed to say. It is not enough. The kingdom you were born into is not enough. The title is not enough. The inheritance is not enough. The performance is not enough. The cage, no matter how beautifully it is gilded, is still a cage. There is a king whose kingdom makes every earthly kingdom look like a drawing, a child made of a palace. There is a love that makes every conditional, performative, honor code-dependent love in your world look like a photograph of a fire, flat and cold and entirely without warmth. And that king is calling you. He is calling you right now, through this screen, in this moment, in this room. He knows your name, your real name, not your title. He has always known it. He has been waiting for the moment you would stop performing long enough to hear it. If you are watching this as a Muslim, whether in the Gulf or anywhere in the world, I need to speak to you with the respect and the care of someone who loved Islam genuinely and practiced it with complete sincerity for 23 years. I am not here to mock what you believe. I am not here to diminish what is beautiful and true in your tradition. I am here to tell you what I found when I went looking for the God who was closer than my jugular vein and discovered he had a face and a name and hands that were nailed to a cross. I was taught that Jesus, Isa, was a prophet, honored, significant, but human, only human. I was taught this with such certainty, such institutional force, such surrounding architecture of law and culture and family honor, that questioning it felt not just forbidden, but genuinely unthinkable. And then I read his own words, not what others said about him, his own words. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. A prophet does not say that. A prophet points toward God, the one who says that either is who he claims to be, or he is the most significant liar in human history. Those are the only options. I read his words, and I asked him to show me which one he was. He showed me. He showed me in a room in a palace in Riyadh at 2 a.m, and he has been showing me every day since. He is not a prophet pointing toward God from a distance. He is God who came close, who came all the way close, who stepped out of eternity into time and walked in dust, and wept at graves and ate fish on a beach and died, actually died, and came back because death could not hold what death had no claim over. He is the Son of God, and he is calling your name right now. If you are watching this and you are simply lost, not royal, not Muslim, not any particular category, just a person who is sitting somewhere feeling the specific weight of a life that looks functional from the outside and feels hollow from the inside, a person who has been performing okayness for so long you've forgotten what actual okayness feels like, a person who has prayed to whatever they believe in and heard nothing, who has reached for meaning and found their hands empty. You are the reason I'm telling this story, not the palace, not the title, not the dramatic escape in a laundry cart, or the royal decree, or the billion-dollar inheritance. You, the person who is tired, the person who is hollow, the person who has everything or nothing or somewhere in between, and has arrived at the same place I arrived at on that Persian rug. I cannot do this alone anymore. He is here for you too, exactly as you are. Not as you should be, not as you're planning to be, not after you've sorted yourself out and become more deserving. Right now, exactly as you are, in whatever room you're in whatever state you're in. He sees you. He has always seen you. He knows your name. I want to pray with you now, not a performance, not a formula, just words from me to you that you can make yours if you want to. If you want to, and I believe some of you do, I believe some of you have been waiting for this moment since the first minute of this video. Then wherever you are, just be still. You don't need to kneel, though you can. You don't need to close your eyes, though you can. You don't need to be in a specific place or position or state of ritual purity. You just need to mean it. Say this with me. Jesus, I don't have all the answers yet. I don't understand everything. But I've been listening to this story, and something in me knows that you are real. Something in me recognizes you. I have been bowing to the wrong things, to wealth, to family honor, to what other people need me to be, to fear, to performance, to a version of myself that was never really me. I am tired of performing. I am tired of the cage, however beautiful it is. Forgive me. Come into my life. Be my Lord. Be my King, my real King, the one whose kingdom has no end and no decree that can touch it. I am yours. Show me who you are. Amen. If you just prayed that, if those words came from somewhere real inside you and not just from your lips, then something happened in the spiritual realm just now that is more significant than any royal decree ever signed in any palace in any kingdom on this earth. You were just born into a family that cannot be taken from you. Welcome. I want to end where I began, not in a palace, not in a gilded mosque on a silk carpet, not in a tribunal on pale gold onyx floors. I want to end in a 2-bedroom apartment with a laminate floor that clicks near the kitchen, with a succulent on the windowsill that I have kept alive for 14 months, with a Bible open in the morning light, with coffee that I am perhaps too particular about, with a ceiling that is mine. I lost a palace of 214 rooms. I live in 2 rooms now, and I have never, in my entire life, had more space. I lost 47 designer abayas. I have a closet with 7 items in it, and I have never been more beautifully dressed, clothed, as the book says, in righteousness that no designer in Paris ever conceived of, and no amount of money could ever buy. I lost a title. I have a new name, written, the book tells me, in a place where no royal decree can reach it, in ink that does not fade by a hand that does not shake. I lost an earthly kingdom. I gained an eternal one. And if you ask me, standing here in my ordinary apartment, in my ordinary life, with my clicking laminate floor and my slightly imperfect ceiling and my one small plant in the window, was it worth it? I will look you in the eye and I will tell you without hesitation, without performance, without the careful calculated answer of a woman trained since birth to say the right thing to the right person at the right moment. It is worth everything. He is worth everything. He was always worth everything. I just had to lose a kingdom to find out. My name is Amira, not Your Highness, just Amira, and I am free.